to the cloud.
Recording.
Okay. Let me just double check on something before we get started. I think we should be good. I'm not sure if this camera is, but we'll give it a shot. All right. Good morning. Happy Friday. How's everyone doing? I love it. Awesome. All right. Well, for the people that are not here physically, but on Zoom, happy Friday and good morning. Can't believe it's already April 24th. You know, we got about a week left, and that's it. April's done. We got May and then the summer love, right? June. So, for people that do not know who I am, my name is Simon Cazares. I am the team lead for the South Bay office, but I'm also the broker for multiple offices as well. We're going to be diving into the requests of repairs. Okay. Um, my opinion, and this is just my opinion, this is the most delicate elements of the entire process, in my opinion. I think this is where most deals fall apart. This is where deals get canceled. This is where deals, there's so much emotional elements to it. Okay. So I'm going to give you some practical ideas and how to navigate that ship to the finish line, right? And we're going to look at it from two perspectives, not just from the buyer's view, but also from a seller's view as well. I think it's important to understand that, you know, how you navigate this will ultimately get you to where you need, right? To the finish line, to get this deal closed, right? And the essence is, I hate to say this, but agents ultimately get in the midst and the chaos and get themselves too emotionally entangled. And I believe that sometimes agents are the ones that ultimately fall into the trap and end up canceling the deals because ego comes in their way, right? And so I just want to give you some ideas, some strategies, and how to look at it from a different faucet, right? It's not always just straight, you know, which we know we're trying to close the deal, right? But the essence is, you know, looking at it from different angles. Okay, how do we get through this, right? You know, when the request of repairs, right? It depends on what they're requesting, right? Is it cosmetic or is it over the top stuff, right? So we'll dive into it. We'll get some perspective into this conversation. And at the end, if we have some time, you know, I would love for you to share any issues that you've encountered and we can navigate it together, right? Right, let's go ahead and get started. So, how to control the most delicate stage of the transaction. All right, where do most deals fall apart? Emotional. That was a misspell. Maury, expectations and fear of all collide at once, right? Why deals die, buyer strategy, seller strategy form, mastery, and negotiating terms, right? So the essence is, you know, there's so many things that can ultimately happen, right? We're super excited, right? Excited to get an offer accepted if you're representing the seller, right? We're super excited when the buyer has identified a property and they want to submit an offer and we get our offer accepted, right? And now we're going through the essence of the escrow period, right? But here's the thing 50 to 60% of the transactions by this time, after requesting and negotiating request of repairs, is where it gets a little bit shaky, right? So, how to navigate that, right? How to get through that elements of it is the critical part of the initial process. All right, so let me see. I'm not good with my left hand. So the real job here is one is to protect your client, maintain negotiating leverage, keep the transaction alive, and prevent emotional escalation. Avoid contract cancellations, right? The ultimate goal is for us to get to the finish line, right? It's not to spend all this time, effort, and energy, right? And now the deal falls apart, and it's kind of like, oh, we're back to square one. We're back to the drawing board. We're back to going out and looking. We're back to weekends out there home shopping again, right? We're so close, but yet so far, right? So this is not about getting the repairs done. It's about getting to the finish line. Okay. And I'll explain it from my craziness in my head, my psychology, and how I think, right? And my way of thinking is obviously different than a lot of people. And that's okay. I'm a little crazy sometimes. But I know how to control the narrative and how to control the emotion aspect of it and stick to the basics of the contract. Okay. Very simple, but yet very hard. So we'll dive into those conversations as well. All right. Let's go into in the discussion of why deals fall apart, right? And this is again just my personal views for many years of dealing with different types of scenarios, right? Everything seems to fall always to the basic stuff. And I always gonna utilize basic because to me it's basic stuff that deals fall apart, right? So let's dive into it and get a better idea of what that is, right? So the truth about the deal killers, right? Most deals do not die from price. Okay. It's not price, okay, because their offer obviously got accepted, right? But there may be room for negotiations, right? Because three things can happen during the request of repairs: price reduction, buyers requesting the seller to fix certain things, or in lieu of the repairs, they give concessions or credit towards repairs, right? So it really depends on the situation. Inspections finding repair expectations, emotional reaction, poor communications. Okay. I see it all the time. Emotions, no one is responding. And now the buyer gets frustrated. Now, I want to be crystal clear as well. Okay. And what I mean by crystal clear is that the seller doesn't have to respond to the buyer's request of repairs. Did you guys know that? They don't have to. They can stay radio silent and not have to respond. And then immediately, when the time comes to release that as part of their condition, send the notice to perform to release that contingency. And the buyer's like, wait a minute. They never responded to our request. But in essence, the seller doesn't have to. Remember, the property is being sold in its as is condition, meaning it's what it is. Buyer, do all of your due diligence, do all of the inspections you want. But at the end, the seller doesn't have to acknowledge your request of repairs. How about that? How about that, right? But I want you to also understand from a buyer's agent point of view, right, that you got to be ready for that and not get entangled in that mess. And now you bring that mess to the buyer, and now the buyer is on the defense saying, okay, well, if they're not going to respond, then we're going to cancel. That happens quite often. Okay. So, in essence, communication is vital. Communication, lack of communication gets us in this mess. Okay. Now, I'm going to flip the table. Okay. Now you're a listing agent, right? And you receive this offer. Okay. The offer gets accepted. You're going through the motions. You open escrow. Buyers doing all of their inspections. And now they slap you with the request of repairs. Okay. Should you stay silent with that and tell the seller, hey, the contract says that the property is sold in its as is condition, so we shouldn't even bother to respond. We don't have to. Let it be. Right? But what if the property is a beautiful home, right? And you're prideful that you got this listing, right? Your job is to sell the property, right? As a listing agent. So, yeah, you can have that conversation with the seller and say, hey, you know what? We don't have to respond. But the essence is imagine You're talking to your child, and your child is looking at you and not saying anything. And they're just looking at you. Isn't that going to boil you? Isn't that going to frustrate you? Right? So think of it from that perspective too, as well, folks. Is silence can also be a bad thing. And there's a lot of real estate agents that they believe that that's a great tactic. They play that poker face. Bring it. We're not going to do anything about it, right? There's pros and cons to it. I personally do not recommend it. Look, you can play the offense, you can play the defense, but you got to play it to win. And the essence is you're right there, 50% there, where if we can push this through, we can get it to 75% and 100% to get this deal closed. So, in essence, is don't play that game. Be proactive and engage and say, we appreciate the request of repairs, regardless of how bad it looks like. Maybe they want a brand new house. That's okay. It's negotiations, folks. Thank them. And we appreciate it because obviously they're still in it. Okay. They're still in it. So I want you to look at it from that perspective as well, is how you position yourself from any position, buyer agent, seller's agent. Okay. You want to make sure you're in it to win it, right? So the mindset here, buyer is thinking, seller is thinking, am I paying top dollars? Why should I inherit problems? Fear, right? Distrust, buyer remorse, right? Because a lot of buyers at this point also get that feeling of cold feet, right? Oh my God, I'm paying so much for this home. And now I got the inspection report. And my God, there's a laundry of stuff that I'm just worried. Maybe we should back out of this deal, right? Believe me, a lot of buyers think that way. What the seller's thinking, you saw the house before you wrote the offer. Okay. Why are we having this conversation? Frustration. They get a little bit defensive. And obviously, the energy and the fatigue is like, why are we wasting time? This property is sold as is. I spend $150,000 in renovations. Why are they asking for all this extra stuff? Because buyers will be buyers, right? And they base it on not just visual, but they base it on what the inspectors bring to the table. There is no perfect home, ladies and gentlemen. There isn't. There is no perfect home. Okay. Even new construction is, you're going to be able to find something. I can guarantee it. You'll find something. Okay. But the essence is, it depends on who you hire too. Now, I hear this quite often, and I'm going to just lay it out. I hear agents says, well, that company, that inspection company kills deals because they overly report all of the stuff, little hairline cracks, you know, they kill the deal. I don't want to use them because they're known for these ridiculous reports. Okay. I kind of like it because I see it as a tool for negotiations. The more stuff is on there, the more I can navigate the conversation with the listing agent. It's not a bad thing. Okay. But a lot of agents see it that way. Let's use a company that doesn't put all kinds of stuff, right? That may come back and haunt you, believe it or not. Because what if the buyer goes with the report, closes the deal, and now there's all this stuff that now could have been prevented? Okay. And the buyer now is frustrated because they feel they bought a home that is in really bad condition. Okay. A movie that I recommend you watch, it's an old movie from the early 90s or maybe the 80s. Tom Hanks plays in it, called The Money Pit. The Money Pit. Okay. If you haven't seen the movie, I recommend it. It's a classic. It's funny, but he ends up buying a property, and it has all these problems. Okay. As a real estate agent, I believe we should watch that movie. It should be a group session, right? All of us have a movie night here at the office, and we all watch that movie. Hey, you can probably get it. I probably could connect my Netflix into it. But the essence is, you know, you don't know, right? Just because the exterior looks fine, we don't know what the exterior or the interior looks, right? It's no difference than a vehicle, right? The car may be shiny, polished, the rims and the tires are nice and clean, but the internal engine transmission, right, may not be in the best shape, right? This is why you want to hire the right people to do the right stuff, right? So here's kind of my thoughts, and depends on the year of the home. Okay. The year of the home. If a home was built anything from, say, mid 70s and down, I would recommend possibly a sewer inspection. Okay. A sewer inspection. Now, if a home is around many trees, regardless on what age, that's a big indicator is we should probably get a scope of the sewer inspection. Just a thought. Okay. Does the buyer have to do it? No. But if they're going to be doing an inspection on the property, it is to their benefit to see what's happening. You know how expensive sewer inspection, excuse me, how expensive sewer repairs and replacements there it's a lot now, you know. I mean, back then when I started my career, it was in the $8,000 to $10,000, you know, and it all depends on the length from the house to the sewer line, right? To the city sewer line. Yes. I would say from 75 and older do a sewer inspection. If a home is in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? Now, I've seen really bad, you know, homes in the 80s and 90s. Not saying that just because the home is newer, don't do an inspection. Use common sense, right? If there's a lot of trees in the property, that's a big indicator, right? What happens with trees underneath? Yeah, there's a lot of roots, right? And those roots can penetrate and crack a sewer, right? And if the sewer gets damaged, it'll eventually go back to the property, right? So it happened to me on one deal in the city of Whittier back in 2002. I remember vividly. And what ended up happening was the buyer didn't want to do any inspections. He got his general contractor win and says, "Yeah, we're fine." So he gave me the thumbs up. He didn't want any request of repairs. He signed up on all the contingencies. And the mistake that they did was it had a pool. Okay. So when we closed that same day, construction was happening. The contractor ended up getting a professional pump and was draining the water down the sewer line. Well, with so much force, it erupted the sewer. Now, the home hadn't been lived in for 5 years. I represented the daughter, which was the trust. It was her parents' home. She grew up there, but the house for 5 years sat vacant. The only time they would use it is for the kids to go swimming because it had a pool. But other than that, no one lived in the home. And yes, there were some trees there, but no one ever thought, hey, they're going to force pressure with a commercial pump to drain the pool. And who does this? Who installs it on the sewer line? Instead of draining the water through the main line that'll go to the street and eventually into that drain. No, they decided to do it through the house, and it blew up. And when they call me saying, "Hey, we have a problem," it says, "What's the problem?" "We have a sewer issue." Sewer issue. Interesting. I go there. And oh my gosh, I get there. And the whole entire front yard, concrete broken, open and exposed. And I could see that the sewer line was broken. And I thought, geez, this is not good in my head, right? But then I saw that there was a commercial pump pumping the water. They stopped, but I can see, and it says, "What is that?" It says, "Well, we're trying to drain the pool." I said, "Interesting." So when I directed that conversation to the seller, says, "Well, we're not responsible. We disclose everything about the property. One, that they never lived in the property. Two, um, you know, we disclose that the property is being sold in its as is condition. We also gave them any and all opportunities to do any thorough inspections. And the contractor that was there just did a visual inspection, but they didn't go into doing any additional inspections because ultimately what they wanted to do was they wanted to tear down the pool so they can build additional homes because the buyer owned the property on the side and owned properties on the back side. So they ended up building six new construction homes back there, but they needed this land because the owner had a 15,000 lot. So they ended up shortening the property line, removed the pool, and that's kind of where the mess started. So it's interesting. It's very interesting. Be careful, because you can be in that circumstance. So stop being a messenger. Okay. Agents who become messengers kill the deals. You must become the strategist, right? You got to think of it from a chess game. Has anyone played chess or checkers? Right? Yeah. The essence is, look, I understand that as real estate agents, we have to know how to navigate, right? And make this a win for your clients because you're protecting your buyer's best interest. This may be one of the biggest assets that they buy in their lifetime, right? And yeah, you want something that is workable, right? That you're not going to close deal, hand over the keys, walk in, and there's a disaster, right? With all these problems that come up, right? A lot of things that happen quite often is roof leaks too. Okay. Southern California doesn't have that much rain, but when it rains, we get a lot of claims about water leaks, right? So that also may be a situation that you have to look into it as well, right? So I was saying about doing sewer inspections. The other major ones that I would recommend is always do a general inspection, do a sewer inspection, do a termite inspection, and do a roof inspections. Okay. Those are the basics that you should do when representing the buyer. And remember, everything is always going to be a risk. Okay. Everything is always going to be a risk, meaning, at least you're going to know up front what issues the property has. And now the buyer has to make a determination. Do I continue or do I decide to back out of the deal? Because the buyer can, during their contingency period, decide to say, you know what, this property just has too many issues. I just want to back out. I'm not even going to ask for any requests or repairs. I'm not going to ask for any concessions or credit in lieu of the repairs. I'm not even going to ask for a price reduction. I'm just going to back out of the deal. Guess what? The buyer can't. The buyer has every right to do so, and there's nothing that the seller can do. Okay, the seller has to give them the time frame, and the time frame per the contract is 17 days. Now that's also negotiable too, meaning the seller and the buyer can come to different terms. Instead of 17 days, we'll just do 10 days. You got 10 days to do all of your inspections and decide if you want the property or not, right? But when that time comes, you have to make a decision, meaning the buyer, do you want to continue? Do you want to ask for repairs? Or do you want to ask for a price reduction? Or instead, because you're a handyman or a handy woman, you'll do the repairs, but just ask for credit instead, right? So you have to look at it from that perspective as well. Okay. Buyer side. Let's talk about the buyer side, which I think I kind of illustrated a little bit, but let's dive deep into it. Set the expectations before inspections, right? Again, knowing how to navigate the conversation. Never say, we will ask for everything. Don't worry. Thank you. Good to see you, okay? All right. He has to go to work, by the way. um, never say, we'll ask for everything, right? Because if you put that expectation right off the bat from the buyer and the buyer doesn't get everything, you just shot yourself in the foot because what's going to happen, they're going to end up canceling. That's simple. Say instead, we expect for major concerns, safety issues, functional defects, and material items, not cosmetic shopping list. Okay, we want to make sure that we hit the major concerns that the property has, right? Because I always use this as a reflector and say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if you were the seller in this position, how would you feel? Yeah. Okay. So this is again where professionals separate themselves, right? It's knowing how to have those conversations with the buyer. Because I know how easy it is. Don't worry, buyer. We're going to ask for everything of what's on that report, right? And there could be a lot of stuff on that report. I don't know. Every property is unique. Every property has their own issues, right? The four categories that create leverage. Health and safety, okay? Always look at it from a health and safety position. Electrical, mold, roof leaks, gas, foundations, right? If the house, when you're walking and you're tilting, that's a big indicator. What does that tell me? Hey, am I crooked or is the house crooked, right? Maybe it's on a raised foundation, folks. And certain area is, the foundation is cracking and the weight of the property, it's forcing it to lean. I know. I had a property in El Sereno down in Los Angeles. It was a flip property, and the kitchen looked okay after with the carpet and everything. But as soon as we ripped everything, we gutted everything, and we started I noticed that it felt like it was a little bit tilting. So I got a marble, and I just put the marble just as a fun exercise, and the marble just went to the left. So then I got the contractor to evaluate the situation because I ended up buying the property as is. I mean, it was a fixer, it was a hoarder, it was in really, really bad shape. And my crew went in there and renovated the property, but the kitchen was really leaning. So they had to reinforce it to ultimately jack it up and balance it out. You know, it's not that big of a deal. Okay. But if for a buyer that's buying a home for the very first time, that might be something very scary, you know? So it really depends. Deferred maintenance, aging roof, termites, damage, old plumbing, functional defects, right? HVAC, appliances, sewer, water intrusions, seller misrepresentation, undisclosed issues, right? Sometimes we see this, the seller doesn't disclose. Maybe the seller doesn't know. We don't know what's above the ceiling here, right? We can only see what's outside. But what if we open up the ceiling and now it really exposes all of the electrical or even plumbing, right? Or issues, right? That's kind of next level inspections. But a thorough inspection company will do all that to give you peace of mind is, hey, you know what? We don't specialize on that, but maybe you should get someone that does. Our evaluation sees that there is some concern up here. Okay. Might be findings and all that. Thank you. Some types of findings, right? You know, Maybe there was rats up there, raccoons. Okay. On one of my properties, I had skunks living underneath, a mother with her babies. As cute as babies, you know, uh, it's really bad odor, right? And the contractors, they were even afraid to go underneath there to try to, remove them. But eventually they ended up leaving. We sealed, underneath, but, that happens. So, in essence, a very thorough inspection will give you kind of a gauge of what the property looks like, right? It's like no difference in going to the doctor, right? The doctor will ask you, well, tell me what the symptoms are, right? And then based on that information, the doctor will analyze what is the next steps, right? Well, that goes also for an inspection company, right? An inspection company is just a general inspection, right? But if there's some concerns regarding electrical, if there's some concerns with plumbing, well, then you want to get an idea of what it's going to cost to repair or replace that, right? That's getting a plumber out there to evaluate the situation. That's getting an electrical company to go out there and evaluate the situation. Okay, so it's very, very important to understand that. Weak versus strong buyer request. Weak destroys credibility. Okay, chip paints, old carpet. I want a newer kitchen, cosmetic wish lists, right? Remember, you got to look at it from what are you really requesting, right? Over serious, serious stuff, right? Because a seller is going to look at the buyer and says, like, really? Really? They're asking for that? And it really depends, right? A strong build leverage, right? Objective facts, contractor estimates, inspection advice, and target requests, right? No emotional complaints. Evidence is based on demands, right? So prove it to me. Just because you're telling me doesn't necessarily mean anything to me. I want to see the inspection report. I want to see the estimates, right? Now, I also want to put this expectation to you got to be very careful in how you navigate that too as well. And I'll share with you on a couple slides when I talk what I mean by that. But the essence is, look, go after major things, not the little things. Okay, the little things the buyer can do. That's pride of ownership. I catch myself sometimes to this day doing some of the things that I should be doing, but I enjoy it. It just relieves my mind, is racking the leaves from my neighbor that I keep telling that I want to tell my neighbor, hey, your tree throws so many leaves my way, and you should clean my because I have a gardener, but every day there's a bunch of leaves. But he's a retired guy, and we have good common ground, and I really like the guy. But there's times it's like, man, I like to go into my home where the front yard, and I put a lot of money into my landscaping, and it's annoying when I see all of these leaves here, or when I open up my gate, it's like piles of leaves, and I step on it because they're dry and old. They crunch. It's like now it's more little pieces. You know how annoying that is? Yeah. I just don't like to pick all that stuff. But the good thing is invest in a good blower. So on a Saturday or Sunday, I see myself blowing, and that just kind of helps me mentally sometimes. But so where was I now? I lost my chain of thought. So you guys get this understanding, right? All right, let's continue. All right, so the most important question in repairs, wrong questions, can we ask for this? Right question, does this improve leverage or weaken the leverage? Just tweaking that conversation, okay? Tweaking the conversation, huge difference in how you navigate and get the deal done, right? Because either you're going to destroy the deal or you're going to win and you're going to continue on the next process, right? Because this is the very delicate walk, right? This is like walking on the eggs, but you don't want to crack the eggs, right? You got to be very delicate because this is also the emotional elements that will either kill the deal or not kill the deal. Okay. And it's our job to handhold the buyer through this initial process. This is your job to handhold the seller as well, because you don't want emotions to kill the transaction. Okay. It's very easy to do so. Okay. All right, so let's look at the strategy from a seller's point of view now, kind of get an idea of what that looks like. The seller's biggest mistake. What does that say? I can't hear you.
You are insulting my house.
Yeah, you insult me. How dare you say that about my house, right? But it's the wrong mindset, right? This is business, not emotions. This is business, folks. Put on your business hat and take the emotion element of it, okay? I get it. It's a delicate dance that we have to navigate. I understand. But let them be the emotion, not you be the emotion. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, take yourself out of the equation and navigate this. You're the captain of the ship. And your job is offense, defense, but looking at it from all facets and how we can get it to the finish line. Okay. Because again, buyers are like this. And if agents are like this, forget it. It's done. You're done. We're canceling. And now we're back to square one. Both lose. The buyer loses, the seller loses, right? We don't want that. Okay. And there's going to be times that unfortunately it has to happen. Okay. And it has to be okay. But if you can save it in every real estate transaction you're ever going to be, it's always going to be a learning lesson. Always. I'm telling you from personal experience, I learn things all the time. And I'm pushing 30 years already. And I still learn things. Okay. So it's okay. Sometimes the deal has to cancel because we're just too far apart. Okay. But it's when you're that close and ego gets in the way, that's a problem to me. We could have literally saved this. And now we're all starting back because emotional and the ego elements came into play. So stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. So the seller's three path. Choose wisely. All right. So the option one, perform repairs, right? Best for lenders, required issue, right? There's certain things that FHA and VA, if your if your sellers are going to accept a FHA or VA client, be ready for some stuff that you have no control must be done because the appraiser will go out there, evaluate, and if they find issues, then that's something that you and your client would have to do to fix it. Otherwise, the buyer is not going to be able to get the loan. That's simple. Okay. And if you're okay with that, meaning if your seller's okay with it, then okay, then the deal's going to unfortunately cancel because it's very unlikely that the buyer will come in to do that, right? And certain circumstances, I've seen situations where the buyer does do the repairs for financial reasons that the seller can't. Okay. Option two, credit to the buyer. Cleaner, faster, fewer disputes. Buyer controls the repairs. Okay. Especially like your older clientele, right? Senior citizens, they're not going to have time if they're not handy. They're not going to have time to do any other repairs. It says, look, let's just give the credit instead and let the buyer be responsible to do the repairs after we close the deal. Okay. That's a win. That's okay. And that might be better. It's cleaner because I see it quite often. The seller is trying to cut corners, try to do it themselves. And now they do it. And the buyer says, I'm still not happy. It looks poorly done. I want this done this way. Right. And now it puts strain and frustration on the seller. And then the seller says, forget it. I don't want to deal with it. So, the best, cleanest way is the credit in lieu of the repairs. Option three, refuse. Only works with a strong backup offer and a true as is leverage, right? Hey, if you're the listing agent, folks, and you have backups ready to jump in, then you're okay. That's your leverage, right? You're okay to cancel with this buyer because the buyer may be a knucklehead and they're not seeing the bigger picture. They're getting a good deal in a great neighborhood in the best school in the area, but they're asking for a laundry of things, right? And the seller's like, you know what? I know what we have here, and we had five other offers. Let's just go with the backup offer, right? That could be the leverage from you as a listing agent saying, look, you either take it or leave it. And if you decide to leave it, that's fine. Unfortunately, we do have backups ready to jump into escrow. Okay. So that could be also a situation where the seller says, nope, we're not going to do. That's okay. And in that type of situation, I can see it that it would make sense to ultimately kill the deal, because what if this other buyer who wants the property is offering even more than with the current, right? What if the buyer number two doesn't ask for all of this extra stuff, right? And that puts more money in your seller's pocket, right? So that can be a win too. So you have to look at it from all perspectives. Is okay, how do we navigate this, right? Yes, we do want to close the deal with the current buyer, but sometimes it just doesn't make any sense. And that means just another 30, 40 days more in escrow. That's okay. You're still going to get the deal done and close, right? So these are the couple the common things that you'll see. Do the repairs, give the credit, or just cancel the deal, or even a price reduction is another element. Not to give the concessions, not to do the repairs, but just do a price reduction. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like as well, because sometimes it just makes more sense to reduce the price than do any of the other two options. Make sense? All right. So, what strong sellers say? Read this, take a photo. We are willing to address legitimate concerns, but we are not reopening price negotiating through cosmetic request. Okay. Strong, professional, in control, right? In essence, the understanding is that, we're going to stand our ground. I understand that there are some concerns, and this is why you're doing your inspections, right? And it may not be a problem to the seller because the seller might have lived there for 20, 30, 40 years, and it's not an issue to them. But to the buyer, it is an issue. Does that mean out of inconvenience that the seller has to do those requests? No, not at all. Okay. Remember, we're not here to give you a brand spanking new home. We're looking at it from what are the major concerns that I can see being a hazard, right? That may ultimately be more expensive if it does end up breaking down, right? I remember many years ago, one of the agents here at the office had a listing, and it had a an extended deck, and the deck was completely infested with termites. And you can tell that, I mean, it was weakening. The roof was already collapsing. And within a matter of times during escrow, what ended up happening, it collapsed. It literally collapsed. So agent says, "Oh my God, the patio deck collapsed." They did an inspection and a termite inspection, and it says that there was a lot of findings, and you can tell that it was really bad shape, right? And during escrow, the patio deck ended up just crashing because the pillars that were holding it was weak, and it just crumbled and fell. So then the agent who represented the seller is what's the next steps here? Well, you got to disclose and you got to let the buyer know, because the buyer may be looking at it from, well, we bought it because of that deck. I want you to replace that deck. And the seller's point of view is like, you're getting the property as is. We knew we had issues. We divulged that. You did a termite inspection, so we're not going to do the repairs. The buyer's looking at, well, what's going to cost for me to do redo the entire deck, right? A couple $1,000s, right? So they see it from that perspective too. Now, from an agent's point of view, is you're trying to save this deal. What can you do, right, to make it a win-win? Where there's many things you can do. Not necessarily that the seller has to take the responsibility to do the entire thing, because the seller's point of view is, why am I going to pay for something that I'm not even going to enjoy anymore? For the benefit of the buyer to enjoy doesn't make any sense. It's like me saying, I have a house with no pool, but put a pool because the buyer's kids want to enjoy the pool. Okay. So that's kind of the view and how the seller looks at it is, how do we as real estate professionals navigate that, right? To make it a win-win, right? Well, I says, look, what if we get some estimates and kind of get an idea what that looks like? So the seller ended up getting two estimates. Roughly, there were around $25,000 to $5,000. And I said, okay, why don't we? I told the agent, why don't you present it to the buyer and says, look, the seller is willing to contribute 50% of it, but not the entire. And if the buyer wants it, the buyer will also have some skin in the game too, and include some of that as well, make it a win-win for both. The buyer is going to enjoy a brand new deck. The seller obviously is going to sell the property, and everyone is going to be in a better position. So they agreed to it, and the agent was able to close the deal because the seller realized that there was a deck. Now the deck was done. It happened during escrow, so the owner still owned the property, but the owner and the agent navigated and says, "Look, I understand. I'm putting myself in the buyer's position. I would enjoy that because it did obviously make and enhance the backyard, having that extra deck there with shade and patios and all that. Thank goodness no one was underneath there, right? And the whole thing collapsed. So it just happened to be at the right timing, right? But at the end, they all agreed. We all pushed forward and ultimately closed the deal. Okay. So interesting times, nothing surprises me in real estate anymore. All right, let's talk about the forms. How are we on time? All right, we still got about 10 more minutes. All right, so here are the most critical forms you must know and understand and control. It is the request of repairs, better known as the RR, the seller's response to the buyer's request of repair, better known as the RRRR. And then a form that is very rarely utilized is the BIE. And another one that I failed to include is the BIW. Okay, so the BIE stands for Buyer Inspection Election, and the BIW stands for the Buyer Inspection Waiver. Okay. And then you have your ABIT, your TDS, and your SPQ, which is, again, common mandatory disclosures that the seller must disclose to the buyer when selling a property. Okay. So the more information, the better, right? So the request for repair is used by the buyer to negotiate. It's a tool, not a demand letter, right? It's basically, here are some of the concerns that we're asking you in good faith, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, to look into, right? Seller may not know some of the stuff, and they only found out because the buyer did an inspection. Let's say the seller lived there for 50 years, never did any inspections to the property, and this is the first time, right? It may be an eye opener for the seller too. It's like, holy moly, I didn't know we had these issues, right? Because even if the deal does fall apart, at least the seller knows what may occur again if a new buyer submits an offer. Now, the seller's request to, the buyer's request and the seller's response is the part two of it, right? When it's kind of the negotiations, right? When you submit an offer, you're most likely going to get a counter offer from the seller, right? And also, when you're going through this elements of it, is the next step is this part when the buyer is doing their due diligence and now is asking for some type of repairs, credit, or a price reduction. And then the seller has to respond like a seller counteroffer or a seller's multiple counteroffer. The BIE basically is the election. This is something that is very rarely used, but it's highly recommended, especially when working with a buyer. Meaning, when you're going through this process, it's just a list of things that the buyer may elect to do other than just a general inspection. Meaning, they can do a sewer inspection, electrical, they can do a mobile inspection, they can do a roof inspection, they can do plumbing inspection, they can do foundations, they can do, and this form has all of the different types of inspections that the buyer can do. That way, it protects you, that the buyer can't come back and says, well, you didn't tell me that I can do more than one inspection. It's just another layer of protection, right? Because a lot of agents just go with a general inspection and leave it at that. Okay. Where this form gives you concise, clear expectation. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, here's all of the inspections you can do. As long as it's within your inspection period, the buyer can do all of the inspections back to back to back or all once in one day. If that means, and obviously it has to be coordinated with the seller, but you cannot interfere with the buyer's due diligence period. Meaning, if they want to do a home inspection, a electrical inspection, a sewer inspection, right? Say 5 or 6 inspection, the seller can say, "Man, oh man, they're going over the top." You got to allow it, because if you don't allow it, one, the buyer may back out of the deal. Two, they may now come back in the future and says, well, I didn't get a chance to do so because the seller didn't allow me to do it, and now we found something and we're going to sue the seller for maybe hiding something or not allowing us to do a thorough inspection of the property. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. The BIW is the buyer's election or waiver. It's basically if the buyer is an investor and you represent a buyer and it says, look, I already know I'm going to tear it down. I'm going to gut it all out. I'm going to put all brand new everything, right? You still want to protect yourself as an agent because you don't want this buyer to come back and says, well, I didn't get a chance to do inspections and now I'm damaged, right? Especially in those delicate situations where it's an investor or someone that's going in where they don't want to do any inspections. Okay. And that's okay. I don't recommend it, but if a buyer doesn't want to do it, you can't force them. But you can say, look, under the broker's advice, we don't recommend, you should still get an inspection because we don't know what's hiding underneath or above or interior, in the attic, right? All of that stuff. And, that may be an issue or a concern that it's just best for you to do your inspection. Even though you're a very seasoned experience and you know what you're doing, you just never know, right? So, but if they still elect, then get them to sign a waiver. Hey, we've told you that you should, you decided, you acknowledge, you sign and agreed that you don't want to do any inspections. Okay, here, sign. Here's your proof. Save that. Because if this buyer comes back and tries to sue, hey, you waived it. Here's the documentation that says that you didn't want to do any inspections. That's your protection. Okay. And obviously the AVIT, right? Your agent visual inspection disclosure, right? As real estate agents, any residentials up to 4 units, you have to do a visual inspection of the property. It's only a visual, right? You're not going to wear a hard hat. You're not going to have a flashlight. You're not going to have your hammer. You're not going to have your ladder. You're going to start climbing and going, oh, the roof looks okay. No, it's on the scope of what you visually see. That's it. Don't go in with the AVIT completely blank. Okay. That just shows laziness. Go in there with something, right? And if you don't know, don't interpret that you do know, right? All these cracks that I see on the concrete floor, I'm not going to assume I think it's based on earthquake or settlement, right? We don't know that. Don't put yourself in that liability. Okay. So you got to make sure that it's just visual. Okay. If a stain is black, okay, don't say, I believe it's mold. You don't know that. Are you an expert? Have you tested it? Have you took it to a lab? Do you know exactly that it's mold? No, right? So in essence, you're just going to say, on my visual inspection, dark spot on the living room side wall by the outlet. That's it. Let the buyer make their due diligence on what they want to do. If they want to get additional inspections and evaluation, that's on them. Make sense? Okay. No, do we have any questions? No, no questions so far on Zoom. All right, so forms are negotiating tools. It's not a weapon, okay, but it's in position to arm yourself, right? Review every disclosure before you submit a request for repairs. Again, this is the common ground that, in order for us to understand the history of the property, we also have to understand, the seller's disclosures. Okay, you know that once an offer gets accepted, that the seller must provide you with seller disclosures within a certain time frame, right? Evaluate those with the buyers and continue doing so that way you know exactly what you're getting yourself to. Because if there's things in the seller's disclosures that you can avoid in getting additional inspections and costs because you already see it and know that the seller disclosed, then you don't need to, but maybe just get an estimate of what that's going to cost, right? So it's vital and important for you to understand that, reviewing these seller disclosures is part of our responsibility, but it's also the buyer's position to arm themselves of what they're going to ask for, if any. Ambiguity in forms creates lawsuits, right? Be very careful. Don't go out there treating yourself like, oh, let's just throw it and say we're going to utilize any legal elements to it, right? Because again, that can come back to haunt you. Disclosures and consistencies, right? Found during repairs can shift liability entirely. Be very, very careful of how you position, right? If you have the proof, it's from the inspection company, right? The inspectors are telling us this is the issue. This is what we're asking for repairs, right? Don't interpret and put additional stuff that you're not an expert in. Make sense?
So the buyer should review the disclosure before requesting.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Part 5, how to control the negotiations. All right. So non-negotiable rules, repair negotiations. Never negotiate through inspectors. That is an agent mistake. 2, never send the entire inspection report blindly. Use relevant position excursions and not a 90-page attack package, right? Here's the thing, folks. I get it. And everyone is going to interpret their position differently. I'm just giving you my perspective, right? Now, if you don't plan to ask for everything on that repair, there's no need for you to send everything. Okay? Just send what your buyer's requesting to be done. End of story. Because I know that these reports can be 80 to 90 pages long. So if there's certain things that the buyer is requesting, just cut and paste that and send that as part of the request, not the entire inspection report. Okay. And I know it's common ground, and I see this quite often, that the buyer sends the entire inspection report. Now, with that being said, if the seller and the listing agent is asking for the entire report as part of the negotiations, then yes, then you have to, because that's going to either tell you yes or no if they're going to do any credit, repairs, or price reduction. But if they're not asking for it, don't divulge the entire report. Just divulge what specifics the buyer is requesting to be repaired or ask for credit, right? Here's the specifics that the buyer is requesting in a story. Okay. Anchor with reason, not emotions. Buyers are upset. Licensed roofer estimates 18,000 replacement due to active leaks, right? Remember, understand your position, understand the elements of what we're trying to accomplish. Meaning is that if the inspector that did the roof says, yeah, this roof is shot, there's no way that they're going to be able to warrant the roof. It's going to have to be replaced. You want to get at least a couple estimates, right? And if you feel compelled that the company that you hire is the right one, then okay, so be it. And you're asking for the seller to do the entire repair of that roof or replacement, then that's going to be your position as part of it. And believe me, I've seen situations where sellers take care of that. I've seen requests of repairs, $40,000, $50,000, and the sellers, you know what? I just want to get this behind me, and they'll do it. Urgency is sometimes the reason. Look, we don't want to start over. It's pretty reasonable to us. I know that the property needs a lot of work, and we're okay with that. Okay. Now, can a buyer ask for repairs, credit, and a price reduction simultaneously? Absolutely, yes. The buyer can ask for all three. Doesn't just specifically say, oh, I'm just going to ask for the seller to repair this. They can also ask, repair this, give me credit for this, and also a price reduction, all three simultaneously. That's perfectly fine to do so. Okay. Number 4, always make the problem the enemy, not the other side. Preserves the relationship, right? So in essence, the way I see it is, look, this is where most deals fall apart. And you got to look at it from, the win-win, right? Because it's so easy to be the victim, and also it's very easy to be the enemy here, right? You're push, 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 and you're not getting what you want, right? And now the deal ends up falling apart, right? And I've seen it. I've seen some bullies out there, and forced to, well, it's something that must be done. It's a health hazard situation. Yeah, it may be, right? But does that mean that the seller still has to do the repairs? Not really. Not really. As long as they disclose it and they say, hey, that's hazard. That electrical box needs to be replaced. I caution you, that may strike a fire, right? But we're not going to fix it. And that's okay. Because what if the seller doesn't have the means to do so? They need every penny of those seller proceeds to buy the next property. And then just putting a electrical panel of $5,000 may take them over, right? So they don't have to do it. They have to disclose that it's in bad shape. The buyer then has to make an ultimate decision if they want to continue or take on the responsibility to do it themselves. Okay. If the email sounds like litigation, it probably should not be sent, right? So you got to be careful. And the reason I put this in here is because I've seen agents act like litigators, right? Look, this is why we have contracts in place. This is the reason, these contracts are defense, but also offense. Use the proper forms for that reason. Don't go and start adding additional statements and emails and all this stuff, because now you're pissed off, right? Look, at the end of the day, it's really this. Either the buyer takes it for what the face value of the home is, asks for any type of credit concessions, repairs, or price reductions, or leave it, not move forward. But in essence, also the seller's point of view is, look, we're selling you a property that is in as is condition. You either buy it for what it looks like or not. And if not, that's okay as well. Our job as real estate agent is trying to, make it a win for all, because again, we don't all want to start all over again. I know for sure don't want to start all over again. But as long as everything is fully transparent, everything is fully acknowledged. Now it's between the buyer and the seller to decide what direction they want to go. And sometimes we're maybe that far apart. Our job is to wiggle, push, navigate, and get them closer. And maybe we're still not there. All right, we can still work it and get them closer, 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 closer. Where then now we came to an agreement. Yes. Now we can push forward and get this deal done. Okay. My approach is pick up the phone and have a conversation. Sometimes what you text, sometimes what you email may come across a little assertive, a little bit confusing, and a little bit it's like, what? It may be unclear to them, right? Or it may just sound, I see emails all the time. It's like, no, he didn't. No, she didn't. Is if I would have picked up the phone, I would have just made it very clear. And sometimes we think that we have to put it in writing, which we should 99% of the time. But there's certain things that you need to pick up the phone and just start having a conversation. That will eliminate a lot of confusion and what we're trying to do. And a lot of agents, unfortunately, don't do that. They're afraid to, they don't want to. They let emails and text message be the bully. They can be the sweetest person, but when they send emails or text, they're bullies. Yeah. But I've seen bullies, and then you meet them for the first, like, man, that's you? My God, you're such a sweet person. But on an email or text, boy, oh boy, they're like wicked. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
It's in the car.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like road rage, right? As soon as they jump in the car, they're a different person. You can see it. And anything is very sensitive to them. I gotta admit, I'm that type. I'm always constantly like going, going, going. And when people are slow, especially when people are on their phone, my gosh, it annoys me. And then I think, should I honk or should I not do it? Right?
You get shot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm just going to go around and just let it be, right? You just never know. You don't know what people are going through, and that's the problem. And you hear this quite often. It just happened twice over last week. Road rage. They were like honking, they were back and forth, and they were like almost going to hit themselves. It's like, whoa, now I got to slow down. It's like, I don't want to be in the mess. And I thought at first it was me because I was having a conversation and there was just a little bit of a delay, but it was not me. They were honking. It was the two other vehicles. And it's like, oh, okay, it's them. So I continue driving and I can hear them screaming and shouting. And then I can see they're like going fast, stopping, like literally stopping, trying to hit. It's like, oh man, I want to stay away from all this stuff. It's pretty crazy. So yeah, be mindful of stuff like that. But in essence, let's not do that in real estate transactions. All right, so ask this before every repair request. All right, if this deal cancels today, was this issue worth losing the house over? I think it's a powerful statement. The question changes everything, right? Average agents negotiate repairs, focus on the line items, get emotional, chase small wins, where top producers negotiate outcomes. Big picture, stay in the negotiating strategy of the situation, and always secure the deal to the finish line and close the deal. That's what sets the difference and the game entirely, right? So keep that in mind when you're speaking with either party, right? The buyer and the seller in these cases. All right, so how professionals get deals across the finish line. The best negotiators do not win by asking for more. They win by controlling emotions, protecting leverage, and knowing exactly when to push and when to close. Okay. And that pretty much concludes today's class. So the real talk, we don't have any time anymore, but in essence, I hope this was a value kind of a perspective. It was kind of surface conversations, but at the essence, it gives you kind of a idea and how to navigate, these requests and repairs. Let me see if there's any questions on the chat that I'm missing. All right. So, hi, Simon. Please make sure to go over paragraph 2 on page 1 of the seller's condition. All right. When you say that, Sherry, are you referring to the seller's contingents, the seller's counteroffer? I'm unclear on that. Can you
Hi.
elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, hi, Simon. I wanted to chat with you. So this is good. This is right where I'm at in my
Yes.
transaction. So the buyer sent over a request for repair. They only have like three things on it. Um,
Uh-huh.
and I wanted to give them cash in lieu. And so on to page two, for number one, for the seller agreement, and then it would be number two, seller agrees to credit buyer, and then I would put an amount there at close of escrow. But if you go um, further down under or number two, um, there's a couple of boxes actually on the quadruple R. Let's see where I'm at. I was going to have this. Yes, so there you put seller agrees to credit buyer the amount. On the quadruple R, on that, it says the seller responds to the buyer request. So you can put on there too at close of escrow to credit buyer. Also there on 1B, you can put the same amount. And then number two talks about seller's condition, and there's a paragraph there, um, and there's some boxes there. And so seller's agreement only applies if buyer one removes the investigation contingency, paragraphs 3L and 8C, except for the following. Well, there'd be no exceptions. By signing and coming to an agreement on this quadruple R, or, and then there's a box, buyer removes those contingencies identified on the signed contingency removal form, CAR Form CR, attached to buyer's request for repairs, or another box, buyer removes those contingencies identified on the attached contingency removal form, uh, CAR Form
So
CR.
what is the question? I'm
Well,
still
do we
unclear.
check any of those boxes other than just putting what amount we're going to
No,
allow? You don't check any of those
just
boxes.
yeah, just
Okay.
the credit and the amount that you're allowing.
And there's no seller conditions. Okay. Yeah, that's all I
Yeah,
wanted to know. And then send it back.
beautiful.
Perfect. I like it
Yeah.
easy and simple.
Yeah, and I think I emailed you to your email that you sent me to as well. I don't know if you had a
Yeah, I
chance.
sent you just that clip, that the paragraph so
Yeah,
you could see what I was talking about. So perfect. Excellent. Thank you so
yeah,
much.
absolutely.
I
All
appreciate your
right,
help.
so appreciate it. And then the next is how do we know when to? So basically, it really depends on the situation, Benita. So, every unique situation has its own perspective, right? When you're um, uh, working with the buyer and the buyer is doing their inspections, right? Um, Now you have the list of things that the buyer has some concerns. And when you're sitting with the buyer, you're going to say, look, here's the inspections. Have you had a chance to review the report? What are some of the major things that you must have taken care of? Okay, well, I want everything taken care of. Okay, so tell me more of why you believe that all of the stuff needs to be taken care of, right? Because X, Y, and Z, they explain what the reason behind it is. Says, okay, look, here's how it works. Put yourself in the seller's position. And if you're now asking, right, for all of this wish list of items, the seller may be taken back from it, right, and may not agree to it. Also, keep this in mind that all properties are sold in as is condition, meaning that the seller doesn't even have to respond to any of our requests. Now, the question here to you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, how bad do you really want this property? Is these items so important that if you don't get it, you're willing to walk away from the home? And see what the response is. And if the answer is yes, then you have no choice but to put it all in writing and send it over to the listing agent. Now, before you send it over to the listing agent, you want to have a conversation with the seller, excuse me, with the listing agent, and say, "Hey, this is Simon over at Keller Williams, and I just wanted to kind of briefly talk to you about, our position. These are first-time home buyers. You want to kind of set the tone and play it out, as softly as you possibly can with the intent of obviously trying to get as much. Remember, this is tennis. You're back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They may come back and says, look, we're not going to take care of all the stuff. That's just not a problem. Give me what the seller is willing to do. I will bat and try to see if I can get the buyer to agree to it or see where they stand. Now the seller comes back and says, okay, we're willing to do all of this except this, this, and that. Now it gives you a position to now have a conversation with the buyer. Says, look, we have some great news. The seller came back. Remember what I said? They don't have to do any repairs, but they came back and says they're not willing to do this, but they're willing to take care of all this. The buyer is going to be in a position as like, I wanted everything done. I says, I get it, but go back. If you were in their position, how would you feel, right? Yeah, I guess you're right, Simon. I guess I'm okay, but I do really want this other stuff to be taken care of as well. Can we at least ask for it? I says, not a problem. Let me see. Is this a must that if you don't get that, you're not gonna buy the property? Well, no, I'll still buy the property, but I just want to see if we ask. Okay, so there's your leverage, right? So now I call back the listing agent. Hey, I got great news. The buyer's in agreement, except they still want this, issue taken care of, the strapping of the water heater. Is there any possibility that the seller is willing to take care of it? I don't think so, but I'll ask. They ask, comes back, says, unfortunately, the seller is tapped out. They don't want to do it, but this is what I'll do. The listing agent telling me now says, look, I'll take care of it on my part. I mean, it's a small fix. It's going to be a couple $100. I'll go ahead and take care of that for your client. Win, right? Because the agent also knows that they don't want to start all over again, right? So the essence of this position is to get it to the finish line, right? So we make it a win-win. I go back to my buyers. Congratulations, we got good news. They all agree to we're going to get that taken care of. Fantastic. Now the buyer now is in a position to release this as part of the condition, so we can continue to the closing, right? So in essence, look at it from that angle when you're navigating these conversations and make it a win-win in all. So hopefully all this information was great. If you want a copy of this presentation, please email me and I'll be more than happy to send this to you. With that being said, I appreciate you all. You guys are awesome. Thanks for being on the call today. And I will see you on the next contract class. Thanks, everyone. Take care and have a safe and a great weekend.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Simon.
Thank you.